Okay, so welcome everyone to GDSC's first workshop. So we'll be talking about HTML5 and CSS. So HTML5 and CSS are basically the foundations for all those websites you see online. So it's the foundation layer. So if you pull up view source, you'd be able to see all these jumbled tags like HTML, body, main, header tags. So just understanding what those tags mean will require some time. So the reason for these languages, you wouldn't necessarily call them programming languages. The technical term would be scripting languages. So they're basically used for styling a web page and then just coming up with a basic hierarchy of what you see on a website. Let's say you take a basic blog, for example, you see the navigation bar on the top, and you see a header which says welcome to my blog, and then right underneath you see a couple of paragraphs. All of those are divided into elements, which we'll be seeing in later slides. JavaScript is also, I would say, within these three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the only language that's correct to be called a programming language, because you can use it for defining dynamic behavior in a website. So if you have need of creating a form, of taking user data and saving it to an external database, that is one of the best use cases for JavaScript. But for most cases, when you're starting out, you'd be creating static web pages. That means you wouldn't have any elements that will need to connect to any external source. For that, all you need is HTML and CSS. So what is HTML? It's called hypertext markup language. So it is a markup language like Markdown, if you've worked with Markdown editors like Tipora or Obsidian. Another markup language which is well known within academia is LaTeX, which you can use to create good looking resumes or research papers. So what HTML does, it describes the basic structure of a web page, and it goes through a sequential element-based workflow. So I'll show a picture. So this is what the basic syntax looks like. So when you pull up a HTML file, you'll see a bunch of tags like these. So this tag right on the slide is a paragraph tag, which is easy to recognize because it starts with a P. So many of these tags would have attributes which you can put inside like this, and then each of attributes would have values which control the content inside. So for example, if you wanted to put in styling, you could put an embedded CSS within these quotes. We'll see that later on how to do it. And some tags don't require the backslash that you see in one of these here, and those are called self-closing tags. So you'd see if you pull up an HTML file, you'd be able to see a couple of tags like that. One common tag that you'd see like throughout is the BR tag. So that does is a line break. So I'd say that's one of the most important tags because dividing content on a website is important. So especially for readability. So all elements within an HTML file use nesting, and you have the main elements, head, body, and then you have secondary elements which come under, called meta, title, header, and footer. And also indentation is a visual indicator for nesting. So just to make it easier, I'll pull up an HTML file and we can go over it. So if you have Replit pulled up on your computer, that'd be also helpful. So you'd be able to code along. Okay. So can you guys see the screen on Replit?
Yeah.
Okay. So right here is a basic HTML file. So you would start out with a tag like these. So doc type HTML and then HTML lang is equal to EN. So what this means is that you're setting your default language to English on the website. And you can, so for all HTML websites, there is a basic boilerplate. Coding this by hand can take a lot of time. So I wouldn't recommend going through. So you'd find a lot of boilerplates online. One of the most efficient skill sets that you can learn is efficient Googling. So uh, a lot of web developers, they rely on their Googling skills to get them through. So uh, W3 Schools is an excellent website. Another excellent website is the Mozilla Developer Network. Um, let's see if I can pull it up. So this is W3 Schools. I'd say this is the most important website you can have saved, especially in your bookmarks. So this website shows you all of the attributes, paragraphs, anything you want. So let's say if you wanted to create a table, you just go to HTML tables, and they'd give you a lot of guidelines on how to insert it into your HTML file. Same thing with CSS2. So going back to the HTML website, we can see that there's a basic outline. So the first portion over here is called the head portion. So in this, you would define all of your meta tags. So that would be the metadata that's attributed to each website. So when you pull up a website on any browser, if you go into developer tools, like over here, let's see. You'd be able to see all this information here, and they'd be having metadata for this exact website in one of these tabs over here. So what we're doing over here is just defining um, what our character layout should be. That would be UTF-8. This tag over here, it's related to responsive design. So we'll see that later on in the slides why this tag is very important, especially if you want your website to show up on mobile devices and any other like conventional screen sizes. So another meta tag would be your homepage's description. And this would be like a field for the author. And then another important tag would be the link tag. So what this does is, let's say you have another CSS file within your directory. So common practice is just to have a file called style.css in the same directory, which you can call from index.html. So you can see that you have to define the type over here, which is text/CSS, and then it's a style sheet. And because it's within the same directory, you don't have to put any extra paths to this. But just for example, if this was in a parent directory, if this was in another directory, you could just put a ... slash. So this would be common convention to find the CSS file if it's in a parent directory. But since it's in the same directory, you can just leave it like this. And then this link right over here, this is another important link. So let's say you want to use Google Fonts and you want to connect to their API. So all you need to do is link to a style sheet and then just copy this link over here and then go onto Google Fonts, find your favorite font and just paste it over here. You'd be able to use it within your website. So you can see like this website's not using the default font of Times New Roman. What I'm doing is calling Fira Sans from Google Font API. So it looks a little bit better than just normal Times New Roman. Okay, let's see. So we'll go on to the second part of a HTML file. So this would be the body. So that's where the majority of stuff would be. So let's say you you have the introduction, and then you have a couple of buttons here, and then you have the about me section. All of that would come under the body tag. And within the body, you have several sections too. One such section is the navigation section, so nav. So within this, you can specify what kind of links you want, whether you want to put any specific images. And the nav bar, which you define over here, comes up over here. So everything in this body tag it comes in order that you see on the web page. You have the nav bar up here, and then it all comes in sequential order. And another tag is header, and then the main body part would come under the main tag. And then you would also have a footer tag. So this is where if you have any copyright messages or anything that you want, let's say contact information or your business's address, everything would come under footer here. So going deeper into nesting, you can see a couple of blocks here called div. So I would say that's a very important block to keep in mind of, because with divs, you can do a lot of manipulation, especially if you use attributes like class or ID. So the importance of these attributes is that they directly link to the style.css file over here. So for example, if you see this header block over here, you see that the image and header one comes under it. So if we go over to style.css, you'd be able to see that header block has its own area over here. So in CSS, everything is divided into blocks, which you can define attributes to. So if you wanted to, let's say for the header block, you wanted to set the width to 70%. If you wanted to change it to 90%, you'd be able to see a change on the website over here. So what that does, it takes up 90% of the view screen. If you were to delete it outrightly, then it would take up the whole space of the website. So the same thing with the successive attributes. Text align is another important attribute. If you want to center all of your text, like you see over here, all of the text that comes under header block would be centered. And then two important attributes which come under this block would be margin and padding. So I would say that's what most developers waste their time on, just figuring out the right padding and margin just to set the element in the right section within the website. So instead of wasting time, like let's say you're making a full-fledged website, instead of wasting time like just figuring out the exact place, that's why we have CSS frameworks and work. So you don't have to create your own CSS files. There are other frameworks out there called Tailwind or Chakra, which you can use. You can just link to it. So instead of a file name, you would just give a URL like this, and it would automatically link to a CSS file that's hosted on the cloud. And all you need to do is take notice of all the class names which they use. Like instead of defining your own class name like header block, they have their own class names within their documentation. So we can take a look at Tailwind UI. So they have a lot of classes which you can look through their documentation. Let's see. One such class is, let's see, Yep. So these would be all the definitions. So all you would need to do is use some class names like this. So if you have a span or a div, once you use these class names, it would automatically form into the layout. You'd get a responsive grid layout that's automatic. You won't have to do any fine tuning by yourself, and I'd say that's a great thing for saving time. So when we come down to main, another important tag. Yeah.
I'll just interrupt you real quick. Before moving on to the main section, does anyone want to ask any questions about what we've covered so far? Go ahead, Robert. Sal?
Okay, so I was just wondering, so you said that the links, the web pages that you linked are in the same cloud. Like, what does that entail? What does that mean?
Do you mean the same directory?
Oh, the same directory?
Yeah. So let's say you have a folder. Okay. So the common practice is to include all your files in the same folder. So if you were to go into a shell like this, let's see, and list all the file names, everything is within like portfolio site solution, right?
Mhm.
But if you were to make a separate directory, like let's say, make directory, so you have new folder, right? And you go into new folder and then make another CSS file, let's say. And you want to pull that, use that CSS file. So instead of writing it like this, you would need to give the new folder name. So new folder, and then style2.css. So if we run that, you can see that everything will change because it's just going to be a blank page, no CSS. So all the web pages you see, they're mostly dependent on CSS styling. If it was just HTML, it looked kind of plain and basic, just like this.
Thank you.
Yep.
And she was asking, what is the DOM?
Okay, so the DOM is called the document object model. So that mostly comes on once we start getting into JavaScript. That's where it appears. So what it is, it's an API for dealing with HTML and CSS components. So if you have prior experience working with frameworks like React, you'd see that they use something very similar to HTML, but it's not HTML. It's called JSX. So it's another like markup language which JavaScript React JavaScript can easily parse. And so if you're doing anything that requires dynamic behavior, that's where manipulations on the DOM occur. When you're working just with HTML and CSS, you don't have to worry about the document object model. Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, so we can go on to the main section right now. So this over here is just a small representation of what you might see in the main section of a web page. You can put in multiple p tags. So everything will be shown like this. Like you have automatic separation between each of the p tags, and you can also customize that too in CSS. So let's say you wanted a bit more spacing between these two paragraphs. So what's very what's very useful about CSS is that you can use that exact tag over here, P, and then come over here, type in P bracket, then padding. So you have all these different options and padding. So a lot of these show like tooltips if you scroll over them. So let's say, for example, this one would be like the show and property set values for thickness. So
Hey, Rohit.
Yeah.
So real quickly, there's another question in the chat from Sal. He's asking whether the website you're working on is hosted online. So perhaps you could copy that link and paste it in the new tab to show him.
Yeah, so this website over here, you'd be able to see it once you submit the Replit link. So this is hosted on a Replit instance, so you wouldn't be able to see this on a separate tab. Let's see.
Okay, so you've not submitted it yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this would be available just as a solution. So you can just like submit whatever you have and you'd be able to see it and scroll through it and then take inspiration if you want.
Are you following along with the link that he's posted in? It has like a template for what he's doing right now. And in a future workshop, we'll like show you how to work with Azure or Amazon AWS and like actually host your website on like a online web server. But you can follow along with this link. Thanks, Rohit. You can continue.
Yep. Yeah, so as I was saying, we can change the padding on the top just by specifying padding top, and all the sizings would be they're mostly done through like pixels. So let's say 20 pixels. So you see this, there's a little bit more gap over here. If you put in 100, you get significant spacing between both the paragraphs. So this is another way that you can use HTML tags within CSS to just manipulate the how content is viewed on the view screen. Okay. So that's done with main. Footer, as you can do the same things within footer. You could, let's say, you either put a p tag and you say that's all, folks, or so it comes right down here at the bottom of the web page. Or if you wanted to center it, you can just style is equal to text align center. So this is another way of embedding CSS within your website. So if you don't want like a separate style.css file, and you know that you're not going to have much styling within your web page, a good way of including style would be something like this. So all of these tags over here, they'd be supporting the style attribute, and basically you can just put in whatever you'd put in within style.css, but in a you don't have to do the particular formatting that you see over here in style.css. You can just use brackets and then just separate all the attributes with a semicolon, and it be able to understand what you're trying to convey. Okay, let's go back to the slides now. Okay. So as I said that a basic boilerplate would look like this. Every single web page that you see online would have all these tags. Like even if no matter what their content is, without these tags, you wouldn't be able to see a perfectly functioning website. So some tips when you're writing HTML5 is that you need to check whether you're forgetting the end tag. So if the tag that you're using is not a self-closing tag, you would require a backslash and the tag name just to close that tag to see to see all of your content. And then all HTML documents should start with the doc type tag over here with the exclamation mark, because you're defining that the specific file within your directory is an HTML5. And then if you want to separate all of your content, another great tag would be the BR tag. So that's a self-closing tag, so you wouldn't need a backslash with that. And as you may have seen, all of HTML code is in lowercase, but it's not case sensitive like other programming languages. But the common standard when you see like throughout the World Wide Web is that everything is defined in lowercase. So these are just some of the basic tags like I went over on Replit. You have all these HTML head, title, body, style. Script is another tag which will come very useful when we're embedding JavaScript within our website. So what script does is that you can directly embed JavaScript script within the HTML file. But if you don't want to, you can create a separate .js file within the same directory. Then you have the image tag. So if you were able to see the profile picture on the website, that's the tag that used. Then if you wanted to create a table, like copy a short CSV file into your HTML, you can convert it just to a HTML table and use its corresponding attributes and values. The HTML form tag is if you want to create a short form requiring like user input. Like let's say if you wanted to get the first name, last name of a user, you would use the form tag. Now the H1, H2 tags, they're header tags. So if you work with Markdown, you should be pretty familiar with this. So what it does is just H1 would correspond to heading 1, and H2 would correspond to heading 2. So all of those would be bolded titles in descending order of size. So H3, H4 would be the smaller heading tags, while H1 would be the largest one. The strong would be if you put text between strong and backslash strong, that would come up as bolded text. EM is for making text italicized. Now another important tag would be A. So if you were to use ahref is equal to any URL, that would define a link. So let's say you were to have ahref and then you have is equal to quotations www.google.com, and then you have a closing A tag, but between the two tags you write something else. This is a cool website, so you'd see a hyperlink to that leads directly to google.com. Another important set of tags would be the unordered list, UL. So if you wanted like any sort of bullets, like a bulleted list, you would use UL. If you wanted an ordered list using 1, 2, and 3, you would use OL. And then for each of these, you would set these as the parent tag. So let's say you wanted bullets, so you would do UL and then a closing tag for UL. Then between these as nested elements, each element would need an LI. So this would be a list item. So you would have LI, and then let's say you have a list of groceries. So let's say milk. So you would have li milk and then \li, and then right below it you would have like li eggs and then \li. So that can go on, and you can do a lot of stuff with lists on HTML. They're pretty powerful. So we already went through this. So what CSS is cascading style sheets, and what it does, it describes how HTML elements are displayed throughout the browser. So without CSS, we wouldn't be able to do much in terms of aesthetics. If you wanted to control like each of the tags that we went through and like assign attributes to them, CSS would be the language that you would reference. So these are the 3 types of CSS that I went through earlier. So we had the inline, where you can just directly put it into the HTML. Then you have embedded, where you have the CSS file within your directory and you can just link it using the link tag. And then you also have external, where you can just link it using a URL. So the basic selectors in CSS. So we have element, ID, class. So just to make things easier, I can go back to the CSS file. Okay, so these references to all the tags in HTML, they're called selectors. So if you're just using a single selector, that would just target all the body tags within the HTML file. Another way is if you were to put a comma, then it'd be targeting both the HTML and body tags. So let's say you had multiple of the same tag. Let's say you had multiple A's, right? So this one would be targeting all the A tags. But if you had one special A tag somewhere, like let's say, and you didn't want it to be white, so another cool thing is that you can define an ID. Let's say link in footer. Let's say we wanted to make it green, right? So what we do over here is so the hashtag symbol over here would be a selector for all IDs within your index.html. So as you see, you can see you have a green link over here. So all the other links are white, but this one is colored green because you directly targeted using a ID selector within the CSS file. Another way you could have done this is you could have used a class instead. So you just change this to class. The only thing you need to change here is change the hashtag symbol to a period. So it would link to all tags that would carry that class. So let's just here, let's just take this out. So both of these texts are green now. So what this does is that any tags you have, not just the A tag, but you could use it for the UL tags. You could use it for div tags. So all tags which have that particular class, any attributes that you put into that, any attributes you put, the elements would have to they have to agree to those rules that are set by you. Okay. Okay, going to another way of selecting a text. So let's say if you see over here, you would see that when I put my cursor over the button, it turns black and the text changes color. So that would be an attribute of the A tag. So if we go over here. Let's see. Yeah, so it'll be this part over here. So what this means is that within class list, any A tag would have when it's dormant, it would have the color black and would have text decoration none. So what this does is like it takes the underlining out. So if we take this out, you get the default of having an underlined hyperlink. But since it doesn't look as good, you can just specify to have no text decoration. And within class list, if you wanted to change anything once you put your cursor over it or hover over it, then you would specify a attribute called a::hover. So what this does, it changes the behavior of the element that you've put over here. So you can change it to any color you want, say yellow, then you can take out the text decoration. So what happens is, so you get a text yellow. Okay. And then another important selector is called the universal selector. What that does, it targets all tags within your HTML body. That would be just the star symbol. Let's say you wanted to change the font family back to so you see all across the website, the universal font, the font family has changed. So sequential order is very important. So anything that comes before it just supersedes everything that comes after. So even if you had like this font family over here in body, everything in this star block over here would supersede, since it's considered as a parent element. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so what I was talking about before, the meta tag, which you saw underneath the HTML tag, what that does, it enables responsive web design. So if you have that particular website which shows up on your phone, it makes sure that it doesn't skew any of your grid designs or any of your layouts. So it would automatically resize or shrink like any images that you have or any like header text that you have. Like if you have like paddings or margins set, it won't it will automatically squish itself to fit the size of the screen. Same thing happens if you have a larger screen, so you'd be able to get your content more automatically spaced out. So some tools that are mostly used within the web development space include Font Awesome. So that includes all logos of these companies that I'm sure like you've seen all these blogs that they included, like GitHub logos or LinkedIn logos or Facebook logos. So what they do is they just go to fontawesome.com and they copy an SVG or a certain icon and you can directly embed them into your website for free. And then you have Bootstrap, which is a design framework based in CSS and JavaScript. So what that does is it automatically embeds responsive design within your website, gives you documentation on how to use their components, and you won't have to manufacture your own CSS files. And you have CSS preprocessors. So what that does is you have a lot of CSS. If you have a lot of CSS files linked within your HTML file, what that does, it reduces the size of each of the CSS files. So let's say you had a perfectly formatted with spaces within your files. So all that spacing, even a little space takes up kilobytes of memory. So what that does is it minifies your CSS file. So it takes all the spaces out and jumbles them together. And that's what happens if you go onto websites and go into developer tools and pull up their CSS, but you can't figure out what they've written because they just minified it, and it makes it harder for human readers to parse and copy stuff from a proprietary CSS file. And like I mentioned before, there are other CSS frameworks like Tailwind UI and Chakra UI, which have their own design language set. So if you're just creating a boilerplate HTML page and you don't have time to create your own custom design language, I would recommend using one of these two platforms. Then the last thing, HTMX, is significantly newer. So what that does, it's HTML, but you can directly embed JavaScript components without having a separate JavaScript file. And we'll go into that in our next workshop, where we'll be focusing solely on JavaScript.
Does
So
anyone have any
just
questions so far? Sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
You can either unmute or you could type in chat. You can raise your hand. So she was asking, what's the difference between SVG and CSS?
So SVG is just an image format. So like I showed you how to embed the IMG tag, SVG is another tag which you can use within HTML, but it has its own attributes. So it uses a grid-like system, so you'd be able to use numeric values to represent an SVG. I can pull up a example for you.
So yeah, while he's pulling that up, SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. So how normal pictures are made up of tiny pixels of red, blue, and green, for example, SVG is made up of math. So the image itself is made up of a bunch of math functions. And we'll wait for Rohit to pull something up. And the advantage of SVGs over normal pictures, if you try to zoom in to a normal image or try to maximize it, it gets blurry and pixelated. right? Like we've all experienced this, but the beauty of an SVG is you can make it as small as you want or as big as you want. And because the image itself is made up of math equations, it will never get blurry or pixelated. It'll always scale to fit any size. So that's why a lot of websites use SVGs, because device sizes can be as small as a mobile phone or can be as large as like a big desktop monitor.
Okay, so the screen that I'm sharing is on the Font Awesome website. So if you were to take an icon like the home icon over here, and you wanted to embed it within your website, you can. So this would be a pro, but if you had pro membership, you'd be able to see the SVG code. So let's see. Okay. So this is what an SVG element would look like. So you'd be able to put in a circle element like this, and then just specify the certain values that you would need to come up with a shape like this. Then if you wanted to get more, so this is what a shape like this would look like. So, and this is how you would specify all these values. So like Shurian said, you would use it's vector graphics. So you need to specify each of these lines. And I'm sure you could use CSS as a style attribute to control any of these SVGs. So, you could probably use CSS to change the size of a particular SVG if you didn't want to do it directly inline in HTML. Okay. Okay. Any more questions for today?
I had like, so I just joined actually, because I had to go do something. But for JavaScript, I guess I have programmed in Java. So, what's like the difference between like Java and JavaScript, I guess?
Oh,
Is
so
there-
I guess the only commonality they have is the name Java. Other than that, they're completely separate programming languages.
Oh, okay.
JavaScript is it's a interpreted. It's not a compiled language like Java. Java uses the JVM to convert directly to bytecode, while JavaScript is an interpreted language. So there's a bit more steps involved. So I guess you could say that if you're using vanilla JavaScript and comparing it to Java, speeds would be slower within the JavaScript side compared to Java.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yep.
And they're both
Oh.
meant for different applications, right? So, so there's like obvious differences. You can do a lot more powerful things with just Java compared to something else. Yeah. Someone else had a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it was me. You probably went over it, but could you go over the hover selector again?
Yep. Let me just pull it up.
And then like maybe what other selectors is often used? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the most common selector would be the singular selector right here, like just taking a tag from the HTML code you have. So it could be a body, it could be P, it could be H2. So a singular tag like that would target all tags within HTML. So if you were to put a, let's, for example, a H3 block over here, and then let's say color. In practice, what this is supposed to do is target all your H3s within this file over here and change it to yellow. Let's see. Yep. So you see this H3 element over here has been turned to yellow. So if this was within its own block and had its own like attributes, so let's say you set this to white, this this universal H3 tag over here would supersede that because it's supposed to target all H3 tags within HTML. And another common selector is if you wanted to select multiple tags at the same time, you just put things in succession like this. So this would affect all these tags over here. So the HTML tag, the body tag, and H3. And then the hover selector. So hover can be appended to any tag, like the nav. If you append it to the nav tag, what that does is you bring your cursor over the nav, it changes its color. So what this does is changes the opacity, so it makes it less transparent when you put your cursor over here. So it's pretty helpful for like just if you have different components that you don't want to bring into the user's attention when they're scrolling through the web page. It's pretty helpful in those use cases. And once they bring their mouse over it, they'd be able to see it more clearly. Do you guys have any more questions?
I was gonna suggest to all the people in attendance here, well, you have this boilerplate code, right? And something really cool to see would be if you took this and replaced all of your Rohit's information with your own. So like where it says, hey, my name is Rohit, change it to your name. Hey, my name is Robert, for example. And if you have a LinkedIn, an Instagram, or GitHub, you can replace all those links too. If you don't, you can just get rid of those and change all of the information to make it yours. And once you're done, perhaps you could share the link in the GDSC group chat so everyone else can take a look at what you've been able to do. And if you're feeling adventurous, you could probably change the colors of something. So instead of a black background, you can make it white, change the color of the text to red, add more buttons. If you have like a YouTube channel, add that in, change the image. So like the workshops are like meant to give you like basic understanding, but you'll only really learn if you like dive in and like change stuff and mess around and do stuff on your own. So I like if everyone who came here could try doing that as little or as much as you want and post the link in like the Google Developer Student Club WhatsApp group chat.
Plus, if you want extra help when making your web page, a good thing to do is just go onto the Replit site over here and you'd be able to post a submission and I'd be able to look over it. And if you want, you can directly message me and I can help direct you to some good resources that will help you come up with a better looking web page than this. I just came up with this in the last hour or so.
So Rohit, could you please post your code? Ali's asking.
Yes, I'll put a text file in the WhatsApp chat.
Any other questions?
So if there's no more questions, thanks guys for attending our first workshop. We'll get back to you when our next workshop will be. Right now, our default day would be next Friday at the same time, but we'll need to confirm that. And once we do, we'll get back to you and post the timings in our group chat.
Yeah, and in the meantime, could just everyone again take this code, change the information, make it your own, and paste the link in the group chat so everyone else in the group chat could take a look at what you guys have learned and applied from this workshop? That would be great. Thanks, guys, for attending.
Yeah, have a good day.
You too.
Mm.